Greetings, everyone. Hello. I wanted to put together a little introductory video for the fall semester 2022 for the class that we are in here, which is Com 409, the Rhetorical Tradition. I'm doing two sections of this class, and I have something like 65 students. We are just packed to the hilt and then some for this required class. This is a class that I have done many, many times. I teach it very regularly. I've been sort of developing this class in an online way for a number of years now. And here we go again. And so while most of the content that you're going to be encountering from here on out has been created like in a previous iteration of this class, this video is fresh. But after this, you're going to be encountering videos where I might look a little different, and the background might look a little bit different, and the date on the video might be a little bit different. I've been doing this class for a long time, so, there might be some weird kind of time jumps, but the content remains, what it is. My kind of interpretation and framing of this content is largely the same. I've made some tweaks here and there, but this is largely the class that I learned when I was in grad school from the great Tom Conley. He taught a 3-semester-long version of what we're doing in one single semester. So it's an important class for rhetoric, for the tradition of rhetoric, for theories of rhetoric, and I'm excited to go through it with you again. So let me just try to quickly get through the kind of the basic information, what you're going to what you're going to be encountering and experiencing this fall, and maybe some tips and suggestions. Okay, so here's the syllabus, which is linked to the top of our Canvas page. This will be our textbook that we are using, the Herrick 6th edition. Everything else will be loaded into Canvas. There's going to be links to supplemental readings that are not from Herrick but could be from anywhere. There are these video lectures. I'm going to be doing these, as I mentioned. They'll be available for like each week of readings and content. There will be something called notes or a reading prompt that accompany the readings that are just, instead of like PowerPoint slides, it's just, imagine putting PowerPoint slides in a single kind of Word document in terms of like numbered key ideas, right? So those are what I do instead of PowerPoint, which is just like, here's the important stuff, kind of breaking it all down, boiling it down for you. So there's lots of information and lots of like supplementary, like supporting information, right? And so I think you're not going to be struggling to like find information. If anything, it'll be the kind of the opposite problem of like, oh my goodness, what do I do with all this stuff, right? And so we'll get into that. But I just want to say, like, top of the page stuff here. I'm still in the Greenspun Hall. Physical office hours will be Tuesdays from 1 to 4. Because I will be going to campus a couple days a week, and then I'm going to do remote or virtual office hours on Thursdays from 2 to 4. I'm not going to just hang out on Zoom and in an open room. If you want to meet on Thursdays, just reach out and we'll set up a little chunk of time, all right? In my experience, students don't tend to show up to either of those office hours too much, except maybe around assignment time, which I get, I understand that, but I just, for what it's worth, I love when a student will just pop by and say hi and introduce themselves and just like chat about whatever. And I'm getting like kind of over the just nonstop online remote teaching. I haven't been in a class of students physically for a full semester since the fall of 2019. And that's like 3 years ago. And it's almost like, wow, an entire class of students will start their degrees and finish their degrees, and I will have met like none of them. Like, this is getting kind of weird, So we don't have like a lot of images and stuff to work on in these things. And so, you're all just kind of names on the screen. I don't love that part. I do like the convenience part of online, as I imagine we all do. But anyway, I'm trying to say, like, it would be great to see you. It would be great if you could come by office hours, just reach out, just say hi. It's just nice. It's just better than we're all just these virtual digital, squiggles on a screen. Anyway, so it's an asynchronous class. We are not having, set times where we have to all log on. the lecture material, the main content, as I mentioned, will be these videos that accompany the readings with the supplementary stuff, and you'll have the schedule in the syllabus itself, so you know exactly what you're going to be doing each week. It's really just on you to look at the syllabus to say, okay, we're doing this week. Go into Canvas, see where it is, to work through that material, to work through any supplementary and supporting material, and just make sure that you're just kind of going through the readings, going through the materials, and making sure that you're keeping caught up. So there's basically kind of two major dynamics to this class that are worth mentioning, and they're kind of somewhat opposite, because on the one hand it's a very simple class, but on the other hand it's a kind of challenging class. It's a simple class in the sense that we just have 2 tests and 2 papers. That is it. All right, I've experimented with different kinds of assignments, but I've found that, you know, these ones tend to work pretty well for the purposes of what we're doing here, which means there's not a ton of like assignment work that you're going to be doing in this class. 2 5-page papers and 2 pretty substantial tests. But aside from that, there's not a lot of little things that we're going to be doing, right? And so that means, what does that mean? That means that you only have to really kind of like gear up your assignment energy 4 times this semester, but you're going to need to do that in a pretty substantial and significant way, because each assignment counts for, you know, roughly a quarter of your grade, right? The other part of it is, so that's kind of simple. That's a simple kind of part of this class. But the other side of that is that there's a lot of stuff, okay? And I can't avoid it. This is the rhetorical tradition. So we're going back to the sophists, Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, to get the kind of the foundational stuff, and then we're going to be bouncing, and then we land in the 20th century when there's lots of important stuff there, Kenneth Burke, Perlman, and then what's been going on in the last 75 years or so. And it's really hard to just boil it down. And I've already been like, over the course of several years, I've been getting rid of readings and trying out stuff and getting rid of that. And this is about as good as I can do in terms of making it both simple, but also kind of like coherent and robust and representative. It's not an easy task. So that's to say that there's a lot of emphasis that's going to need to land in your own lap, and there's going to be a lot of independent work that you're going to need to do to keep caught up, okay? So when I mentioned that it's kind of simple and basic in the sense that we just have these 4 assignments, and I give you lots of lead time for the papers too. So you're going to have like a good month to write a 5-page paper, but it's a challenging paper. And you got to be doing lots of critical thinking, and you got to be doing research, and you got to be detailed, and you got to write a good, sharp, coherent paper, right? It counts, it matters. And so there's a kind of balance here where, you know, we don't have a ton to do, but when we do have stuff to do, you got to kind of really bring it. And in order to bring it, you got to make sure, I'm going to try to say this as many times as possible, please stay up on the material. Please do the readings each week. Please watch the videos when you do the readings. Don't breeze through the material. Don't skim. Don't go as quickly as you can just to get through it. Because here's what happens. When we have our exams, we have the 2 exams. The first exam is 90 minutes. The second exam is 2 hours. There's only 25 multiple choice questions for a 90-minute exam, and then 5 short answer questions. Doesn't seem like a lot of questions. When I used to teach this class in a classroom, students had no problem getting through that 90 minutes and writing on those 30 questions. But that's because they were expecting to come into a classroom and not be able to consult their materials, right? So they did all their studying before the test, and then they came in and took the test. Now what happens is students have their books, they have their notes, they have everything right in front of them. I can't police it, right? And so I know that the books are open, the notes are open, and so I'm pretty sure what's going on is during the test is when students are looking for the answers to the questions. And so now time is becoming a major problem, right? Because it can take, I don't know, a minute or so to look around and find the answer to a question. I try not to ask questions that are just a matter of like, okay, there it is on that page. They're meant to be thoughtful questions that test your actual understanding and knowledge of the material. But I'm pretty sure there's lots of searching through the materials looking for answers, and that eats up time. The reason I'm mentioning this is because the written questions are worth 10 points each. Certainly on the final. I think maybe 5 or 10 points on the midterm. The point being is that the biggest part of your grade for each of the tests is in the written portion. At least 5, if not about 5 times more point value for the written questions than the multiple choice questions. But I find that students take so long to get through the multiple choice, even though there's only 25 questions, they don't leave themselves enough time for the written questions, and then they lose out major points, like 20, 30 points, because they don't have time to get through the writing questions. I usually say this about 4, 5, 6 times throughout the semester. I'm going to start saying it right now. Please, please, please prepare and study for the tests so that you're not looking for the answers during the test, so that you leave yourself time to write the written answers. And I do know the difference between an answer that is thought through and is rooted in understanding versus one where you're choosing a phrase from the notes here and you're choosing a phrase from Herrick over there, borrowing some language from here and just kind of smashing everything together and hoping for the best, okay? So I'm not trying to be snarky here. This is just the most common sort of struggle that I've been noticing over the recent years of teaching this class. All begins with keeping up with the material. And I know there's a lot of it, but if you just keep going each week, do the readings, watch the videos, good. Any questions, reach out to Conley, ask him the questions, proceed to the next week. If you allow yourself to fall way behind on the material, you're not going to be prepared for the tests. You're going to be looking for the answers during the test. You're going to run out of time. You're going to lose 20, 30 points or more. And you're just going to have such a hard time to like get the grade you want, you know? So number one most important thing, stay current, stay up. Please, please, please do the material. Okay. Hopefully I've said that enough. So 4 assignments, the Herrick book, it's the entire, sweep of rhetorical thought, at least since people started writing about this thing called rhetoric. First, the activity kicks in terms of like people trying to engage in deliberative practices and standing in front of audiences and using these appeals and different resources of persuasion. And then the writers start noticing and start theorizing and start cataloging and typologizing. And now we have rhetorical theory, right? So I'm someone who believes that theory follows practice. We do something and then we try to figure out what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it. So we're interested in the theories of the practice. We're interested in how it is that rhetorical-minded individuals are looking at the practices of persuasion and writing about what's going on there and recommending better ways or worse ways or, giving their 2 cents on what it is and how it works, right? So it's not meant to be strictly a theory class, and it's not meant to be strictly a history class, but it is a history or a survey or a sweep of major thoughts about the practice of rhetoric, going back to the kind of beginnings of democracy in Athens, Western democracy, and how rhetoric is involved in all that. All right? Now, because there is so much material to cover, and it's just impossible to do it, I have come up with a way to try to organize and structure and frame this iceberg of information. And that leads us to the 4 main models of rhetoric. So the first thing that we're going to be doing, if you jump to the 4th page on the syllabus, week 1 it says we got orientation, we got course overview and introduction, so that's this video, and then notice we're jumping into the 4 main models of rhetoric. I've got some notes on the 4 main models of rhetoric, and I've got a video on the 4 main models of rhetoric. And so just work your way through those. The first thing we want to do is get pretty good on what are the 4 main models. Basically, the 4 major traditions, the 4 major kind of paradigms, the major kind of coordinates that we can think about when we think about persuasion. 4 major ways that we can kind of envision the business of rhetoric and rhetorical persuasion, right? And these are represented by 4 major figures. So we got the sophists, first of all, and the figure that we're focusing on there is Gorgias. So the Gorgianic tradition is the first tradition, and that's the sophistic tradition. That's a very particular kind of model of rhetoric. It's all about kind of instrumental influence and kind of manipulation and doing whatever it takes to win. That's frankly the model that I think probably is most common in terms of like rhetoric as deceit, right? And then after the Gorgianic tradition, we will look at Plato. And Plato is not necessarily a rhetorician in that he was like endorsing it, promoting it, encouraging it, trying to make it better. He was a critic and a foe, a frenemy of rhetoric, because he wrote very sharply about rhetoric and asked really important central questions about what it is we're doing when we're using language and we are attempting to persuade each other towards certain ends. He asks the greatest questions that anyone could ask about what rhetoric is, why we do it, how we do it, how we might do it better, why we ought not do it, kind of thing. That's the second model. The third model is probably the most important one. That's Aristotle, Plato's student, come along and said, all right, love me some Plato. However, he's way over here. Let's focus on what we're actually doing when we are persuading, and when we're doing it better and worse, and what are the mechanics of the whole thing. So Aristotle's super important in terms of the how of persuasion, what we're doing when we're persuading. So if any of you are in my persuasion class, Principles of Persuasion, we touch there. We touch on Aristotle. In both classes, we're going to be starting out looking at Aristotle. But if you're in the persuasion class, pay a little bit extra attention to the Aristotle stuff, because it's going to help us think about, what we're doing when we're persuading. And then the final model is the Isocratean/Ciceronian model. And we can think of that as I think of that as the best of the others, right? And so it brings together all these different kind of traditions in the ultimate model of the civic sort of debater, or the civic orator who cares about the political community, is artful, is imaginative, is rooted in virtue and goodness, right? The good man skilled in speaking is this famous definition of rhetoric that is usually attributed to Quintilian, and that's kind of the idea. The good person, virtuous person who's skilled and gifted in eloquence, and that's the highest model of rhetoric that they could envision, right? And so we'll look at that one as well. So those are the four major traditions, and then once we cover the groundwork in terms of those basic coordinates, then as we proceed, we'll always be able to kind of gesture and refer to either of the traditions to say, all right, here's a new theory of rhetoric. Which of the traditions does it best align with? Chances are one of them makes the most sense. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've never come up with a fifth model. I've never seen anything that falls outside of those four kind of coordinates of the universe of rhetoric. So it has worked well, and it's a good way to kind of ground and add some shape and some coherence to this massive mountain of information on rhetoric. So we got the assignments. We've got the content is just 3 units. The ancient unit is super important. The late modern and contemporary unit is really important. And then we have a tiny little 2-week unit in the middle where we kind of cover the distance between. There are some interesting things that happened in the Renaissance and early modern period, which are worth knowing, even if we don't go deep into that stuff, and even if it's not super relevant for what happened in the 20th century, but it's still useful to kind of be aware of it. So that's it, gang. Let's see. Exams, concept papers. The concept papers, as I mentioned, these are critical essays. They are analytic essays that are asking you to draw on the conceptual knowledge that you have been developing about rhetoric, and to use that knowledge in the analysis or the kind of review or some kind of diagnosis of a text or a problem or some kind of rhetorical practice. All right, we're trying to enhance our conceptual understanding of what this business of rhetoric is, how it works, with some kind of historical continuity to it, to see how the stuff that those old fuddy-duddy ancient dudes were talking about way back when, a lot of that stuff is still totally relevant, totally applicable. So I don't teach this stuff because I have a particular weird fetish for like dead old white Greek guys, right? The questions they were asking, the theories that they were deploying, the tensions, the issues, so many of those things are still with us today. So it's the continued relevance and the continued need for being aware of old conversations. I mean, the stuff that Plato is dealing with in his dialogues is largely still relevant today. So hopefully you see that. We're still dealing with issues of power. We're still dealing with issues of deceit. We're still dealing with issues of, the power of technology, even if way back then it was just the power of writing, versus today it's the power of algorithms or whatever, So hopefully you see those continuities, those persistent themes across the times. And I think that's probably mostly it. What have I missed here? We're coming up on 20 minutes, so that's usually pretty good. So introductory video, 4 main models. Just all you got to do is look through the syllabus to make sure you know what we're doing each week. then go to the Canvas page. Everything's laid out pretty much exactly as it is in the syllabus. You're probably going to find more things in Canvas than are listed in the syllabus. That's all meant to help supplement, and it's connected, and so just kind of like work your way through that. And again, if you have questions about what's there and how it kind of fits together or what's being talked about, I know this is old stuff, some of the language is weird, but I'll do my best to make it make sense and to make it relevant, or to for you to see how it's relevant, and why we're engaging these kinds of weird texts and interesting, strange conversations about how we live together and how we influence one another and the resources that we bring to bear to all that. So it's both a wide-ranging class, but it's also pretty tight in terms of the kind of conceptual interest. But the main thing, I'll say it again, is that we are staying up with the material, keeping up with the syllabus. If we fall behind and we get, behind on readings and videos, it's just so hard to get caught up. And I see that show up in the tests when I see questions just not answered, and I feel like, oh man, they didn't get properly prepared, and so there it is. I try to give you lots of help in terms of supplemental materials and in terms of like study guides and so on. But if there's other stuff I might be able to do, please reach out. As I say, I do hope that I get to meet some of you. Meetings, drop by the office, reach out, ask questions. I really do enjoy it when students ask questions about readings, or if you say, hey, Dr. Connolly, that reading made me think of this movie I saw the other day. I don't know. I love that sort of like, oh, I saw rhetoric. So anytime you want to just reach out and chat, that's cool. Mostly just at home still in the office. So interactions are lovely. All right, gang, so that's it. I hope everyone's well. Let's have a great semester. This is important stuff. We are in tough times. And the stuff in this class and in this tradition is really about how we live together linguistically, symbolically, how we relate to one another, how we attempt to work with each other, right? I feel like it's never been more relevant in terms of the utility and the ethics of social persuasion. So hope you see that, and hope you walk away with some enlightened understanding about it all. And with that, I'll sign off and talk to you soon. All right, take care.